Your first line is your first line of defense. Put simply, first line is your essentials boiled down to what you absolutely have to have or won't go without. In this context, it's usually a belt setup, but I've seen people do it on a minimalized chest rig. So let's talk about what should be on the belt. First, let's get this out of the way. It's really up to you. There is no standard rule that says you have to have certain things on that belt. For example, day to day, many of us head out the door with a pocket knife, wallet, phone, and a pair of keys. Maybe you carry a pistol, maybe not. This is your first line in that scenario. In a tactical scenario, we usually consider the minimum to be a handgun, a spare mag for that handgun, and a medical kit of some sort, even if it's just a tourniquet. The max, it's basically as much as you can fit on the belt and still get things done. You do have to be able to wear it and move around. Now that we've set the outer limits, let's talk reality. The most common setup, pistol, IFAK, 1 or 2 pistol mags, 1 or 2 rifle mags. Common additions are a dump pouch, flex cuffs, a radio, a knife, a multi-tool, fire starting gear, flashlights, anything like that. From what I'm seeing, more and more folks are going to really the less is more concept in the civilian world. The military world is a little different still. So far we haven't really talked about the belt, and honestly that really should be first. The type of belt really determines a lot of your other equipment. There are padded belts, usually Molly. Might even make more sense to just call them sleeve belts because some of them are not padded, but it's where you slide a duty belt of some sort inside a sleeve that has Molly panels on it. And you're gonna wear that over your clothes. It's not involved in keeping your pants up. You could totally put it on over PJs or nothing. Molly pouches are usually cheaper, they're easier to get. This is definitely an option if you're planning to carry a lot of gear. If you're not carrying a lot of gear, it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and you might be better off with the kind of system that I'm currently running, which is an inner and outer belt setup. You have a outer belt, which is very often just a standard instructor belt or tactical belt with Velcro on the inner side, and then a Velcro belt that you wear in your pants that is holding your pants up, and also that the outer belt mates up to. It is not great for carrying a bunch of gear, but it is very comfy. Your pistol's the foundation of this, and it really needs to be something practical and reliable. This is not where you're going to put your subcompact or pocket gun. This is mid or full-size guns, and preferably something industry standard enough that you can easily get holsters for it. Normally I run 2 spare mags on the belt plus 1 in the pistol, but I leave the gear with nothing in the chamber, which gives me, in this case, 51 rounds for the pistol. If I'm putting on the gear, I can chamber a round. If I don't have time for that, I probably should have been using the nightstand gun, right? A lot of folks these days are putting the pistol on a drop leg setup. There are a number of basically bars. It's a polymer strip that attaches to your belt and that attaches to the holster or to a quick disconnect for the holster. And those go on the belt and give you a little bit of a drop. There are plenty of other drop leg setups. Personally, I prefer a higher carry, but you can see that it's still a little bit below the belt in terms of the actual holster. I really think that you have to have retention. I chose the GLS system. A lot of people run the ALS system, right on up through the ALS level 3 retention. I don't suggest doing a holster without active retention on this. It's not just about having somebody try to grab the pistol. It's about having the pistol knocked out of your holster while you're climbing over, under, around something. It's about making sure it stays where it's supposed to while you're doing whatever you're doing. Now, where exactly you should position things, that's up to you. I've showed a number of examples on here, and you'll notice that the pistol tends to be further forward than you would normally think. It's not usually an appendix carry, but it is further forward on your hip than a traditional carry. Now, if you are used to having it further back on your hip, like I am, it can be awkward. It takes a little practice. But work on it, figure out what works for you. With magazines, you do want to run them further forward. You don't have to go a full competition rig setup where they're practically in front of you, but start out further forward than you might think, because that way you can still get to them with your offhand. Meaning, in the case of a magazine, you can, if you're right-handed, you can get to them with your right hand. That's key. You want to be able to get to your most critical supplies with both hands. I need to get a setup to put a tourniquet in the front and the med pouch in the back, possibly with a second tourniquet. I just can't find a freaking pouch that I like that isn't $120. Now, why do you have ammo on the belt? The idea is simple. You have ammo because you may not be wearing, or you may have taken off your second line gear, which is your chest rig, plate carrier, whatever you want to call it, that had your extra ammo. And if you don't have that, you don't want to be out of the fight entirely. You want to at least have a reload for your primary weapon and your pistol. Likewise, life-saving gear like the IFAK and a tourniquet should be on there, even if it's very minimalistic. A lot of guys basically just run the tourniquet on the belt. Now, keep in mind, there's a school of thought where you're adding a lot of gear to your first line, and you're basically treating it as your second line as well as your first, with the exception of protection, where your second line is really just a body armor. That's a theory. I think the problem with that is always the weight. If you're going to do that, you really want to do suspenders and a padded belt. Honestly, there's no easy answer, but it seems like most people slowly reduce what gear they carry. A lot of people start out very basic, then they start adding a bunch of gear, and then it starts going away. Now, a few considerations. These are things just to keep in mind while you're doing it. Weight is a huge deal. If the rig is heavy, it's going to try to move around when you move. I mean, it will try to slip and slide on you. If you want to do a heavy load, you're going to want suspenders and either a grippy belt or a really solid inner outer belt package to keep it all in place. Reach is tricky. You need to be able to reach things with both hands or accept that that item is not going to be reachable with one of your hands. So you're going to want to experiment before you permanently mount things. For example, if you're putting them on a molly panel, don't weave all the molly. Slide it through, put it in place, and go, can I reach that? How does that work? If I put something else there, can I reach past it? For example, if you have a bulky pouch, you may not be able to reach past it to get a magazine that's behind it. Price is not minor on a lot of this equipment. Pouches are not cheap, belts are not cheap, nicer belts are definitely not cheap. Focus on your primary needs and remember that you can upgrade individual pieces on a kit like this. The solid belt and holster setup first is key, even if you don't have any spare mags, even if there's no other pouches. Solid belt and holster setup. Then you can add other gear, but that is way better than a lousy belt and holster setup with top tier pouches, in my opinion. And last, you gotta practice with it, particularly if you rearrange things a little bit. When I filmed the short that I put out yesterday, I moved things after the first take because I realized looking at the video that, hey, with the weight I lost, I can move those pouches further forward. It'll not just look better, it'll work better. You will find it very unintuitive if you're used to a more traditional setup, if you're used to an EDC setup. This kind of gear is actually very easy to use, but it is different than what you may be used to if you haven't run a system like this. Now, if you're law enforcement, if you are prior military, you may be very used to this gear and not have any problems. You just have to get used to where you put things on your individual setup. Practicing with it has other purposes. One of the reasons I switched from a padded belt was that I found that in warmer weather, it got too hot. I was literally sweating my ass off underneath that belt, and it was just bulkier than I wanted. I decided that I wanted to go slimmer, more minimalistic, and I'm not unhappy with that choice. So, take care, have fun, stay safe everybody, keep shooting, keep practicing.